Even if you've seen Ghostbusters 100 times, you probably haven't considered its thematic meaning. It's easy to overlook because none of the characters have much of an arc, and while thematic topics do come up, they're not really debated. So is Ghostbusters just a fun movie with nothing to say? Well, that's what YouTuber Patrick H. Willems concluded a few years ago with his video Ghostbusters, a movie about nothing. But as much as I love this guy's work, at Storygraph, we're far too stubborn to leave it at that. We believe that by its very nature, a story's meaning emerges whenever you track the beats of its narrative arc, even if it's unintentional. Then what do we find when we look at the common thread over all of Ghostbusters' key moments? Well, let me tell you, we have a story that's definitely about something. Because Ghostbusters is a love letter to that other cultural landmark of the 1980s, Reagan-era free market capitalism. It turns out, if you don't mention capitalism at least once on your channel, they revoke your video essayist license and feed all of your content to Nerdstalgic. Now, I'm not a political scientist, and this video won't be a nuanced socio-economic dissertation. We're just gonna deal with the broadest of strokes today, the flavors of Reaganomics, if you will, as they pertain to the themes of the movie. But enough disclaimers, let's dive in. Dr. Peter Venkman is a professor of parapsychology at Columbia University. Despite the prestigious spot in an Ivy League school, Venkman is not much of a scientist, and he really doesn't give off the vibe of someone who actually believes in parapsychology. In this introductory scene, we see him actively skewing the results of one of his experiments, presumably to manipulate a student into sleeping with him. This ploy seems to work on this young woman, and it's likely not the first time he's done this. In his position of authority, he's literally and figuratively holding all the cards, just the way Venkman likes it, though his students may not always see this arrangement as advantageous as he does. With this abusive, predatory behavior, Peter Venkman is obviously the villain of the film, and even in the 1980s, audiences viewed this character as especially repugnant. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread that. With his endearing, rascally charm, Peter Venkman is obviously the hero of this film and is a beloved cultural icon to this very day. Though Venkman's talents don't seem to lie with science, we can infer that he's crafty enough to land a job at Columbia and keep himself employed this long. Venkman is a con man and a manipulator, and he's not above using mild torture to get what he wants. But he's here in some basement squandering those talents. Maybe he's in the wrong line of work. On the other side of the character spectrum, Venkman has some nerdy friends/collaborators over at Columbia. First, we have Ray Stans. He's mostly framed as the easily excitable, childish one of the group. Then there's Egon Spengler, the techno wizard. Unlike Ray, he's mostly emotionless, as he's always focused on the science at hand. Ray, Egon, and I guess we'll count Venkman, are paranormal scientists researching ghost sightings in New York City. At this point, they've had very limited success in their findings, and thus Venkman's only humored their claims so far. Ray and Egon are serious about their scientific work, but tend to be better at reading data than reading people. But with their strengths and weaknesses balanced out, this team makes up one powerful entity. Egon, the smart guy, is the brain, Ray, the sweet man-child, is the heart, and of course, the ballsy cocksure Peter is always thinking with his gut. After investigating an active ghost sighting at the iconic New York Public Library, our paranormal investigators finally see undisputed evidence of the spirit world. At this point, they don't know what to do, and it shows. While attempting to free the nipple of their haunting problem, a ghost gives the boys an acute case of the Ghiblies, and they book it out of the library. At this point in their character arcs, they are afraid of yes ghosts. However, with today's new findings, the two nerds seem confident that they might be able to catch and contain a ghost. Venkman seems convinced that they're onto something now. This isn't just wacky hypothetical fringe science, but the precipice of a viable new frontier exclusively accessible to these three guys. Back at the school, they're far less impressed with this whole deal. Our heroes find that they've been fired for not living up to the standards of academia. Well, maybe more like Venkman violated all the basic rules and the two others were guilty by association. In this school setting, a man like Venkman appears to be a detriment to his friends. Dean Yeager really lays it all out for us while he tries to conceal his satisfaction.
Your theories are the worst kind of popular tripe. Your methods are sloppy and your conclusions are highly questionable. You are a poor scientist.
He's not wrong either. I mean, what self-respecting dean wouldn't fire this guy? No science is getting done. His friends are off chasing invisible ghouls and ghosts, and he's using school resources to... I mean, go ahead. Let me know in the comments if you think the dean is making the wrong call here. But maybe that's the point. Sure, he's being a jerk about it, and we're supposed to hate this guy, but he's not making the wrong call. Maybe our boys really just are in the wrong field. Ray and Egon are onto something way outside any science we've come across so far. As for Venkman, we already know he doesn't take any of this seriously. As Dean Yeager claims, Venkman sees science as some kind of dodge or hustle. And again, he's right. He's just saying it in a way so that the audience wants to punch him in the face. In fact, Venkman seeing science as a hustle is the very notion that's going to skyrocket him and his friends to fortune and fame. The prestigious Columbia University was likely chosen for the setting of this first chapter to show both the skill and intelligence of our protagonists, as well as the lack of malleability associated with a legacy establishment like an Ivy League school, with the crusty old dean representing a college too set in the old ways for eccentric new methods. Our heroes are are destined to be industry disruptors, and the film is showing us that a university is no place for industry disruptors, even in the best of schools. It's time this big fish left the small pond and reached out for something far, far bigger. But in what system can someone with the natural ability to exploit and manipulate people team up alongside two guys with a new, flashy, untested idea in order to make a decent living? Now jobless, an anxious Ray laments about the end of their collective careers to Peter, who doesn't seem to be very fazed by any of this.
Einstein did his best stuff when he was working as a patent clerk.
It's very in character for Venkman to attribute the highest achievement of one of history's greatest minds to his office day job. The screenwriters are already hinting at their main thesis, but then Ray comes in and gives it all away here.
Personally, I like the university. They gave us money and facilities. We didn't have to produce anything. I've worked in the private sector. They expect results.
Right there, Ray is examining the film's central thematic conflict. We're being told that even people with big ideas can just goof off forever in academia, wasting other people's money doing essentially nothing. Now Ray's concerned he's actually going to have to make something useful for a change. He's afraid of a scary market that expects results from him. The film has been framing him as a child because it wants you to see this line of thinking to be immature. Ray's afraid to grow up and join the rest of the world of adults in the free market. With the theme established, it's time for Venkman to step in and use his untapped skills and start the plot rolling on our thematic bingo card. And you know this is the important part because Bill Murray sings it.
They call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. I believe that we were destined to get thrown out of this dump, to go into business for ourselves.
This film's call to adventure is not the call to fight ghosts. The call to adventure is starting up a private business. It's the call to make money. And this movie could have been easily about three guys starting a health spa or a bakery. As long as there was some kind of fun set piece at the end, the message would be pretty much the same. The ghosts are just an aesthetic. Venkman will use his nerdy colleagues' technological tinkerings to get wealthy, because he's the one who knows how to tinker with people.
I play the orchestra.
Venkman has taken the nerds out of the playpen of academia into his realm, the free market. And that's the end of the character arc. From here on, there will be no significant growth for anyone. Henceforth, they will become men of action, risking everything in the pursuit of financial glory no matter the cost, all the way to the very end. So since we're done with the character arc, let's throw this Venkman icon in the trash, and let's pop the Ghostbusters logo up here because there's still a lot more movie left to track, and this theme is just getting started. The first part of Venkman's plan is to raise the capital to start their business, and since you should never invest your own money in a new enterprise, he talks Ray into mortgaging his childhood home. They risk Ray's one big asset, which has a lot of sentimental value to him, and Venkman doesn't seem to haggle down the price at all. This is all mirrored one scene later when Venkman and Egon try to negotiate the price of the firehouse down with the real estate agent, but sweet baby Ray's childlike glee tanks the deal and they pay full price. Once again, the film makes a child out of the man who was content to waste his life in the bowels of some college, letting his valuable property just collect dust. With this new investment, the film is symbolizing Ray's first step into adulthood. The free market is for the bold and mature only, so he'll have to say goodbye to childish things. Here, Ray's unproductive sentimentality is directly compared to Venkman thinking about their financial futures. This is the central goal of the movie. No matter the financial risk involved, the fixer-uppers they'll need to purchase, the judgmental side-eye from their new secretary Janine, or the debasement and shilling they'll need to endure, Venkman wants his own lucrative business and he will not stop until he's done that. Hell, he's not even gonna stop there. And that kind of takes us to my next point. On the other side of town, we have Dana Barrett, a professional musician who lives down the hall from Louis Tully, a loser accountant and the hugest dork in the movie full of dorks. Louis is obviously into Dana, but he's coming on way too strong. Clearly, she's not at all interested, though he remains persistent against all odds. One day, after checking out the Ghostbuster commercial on TV, Dana discovers a demon in her fridge. With this hell dog where her ecto-cooler should be, there's only one question we should be asking.
Who are you going to call?
Dana calls upon the professional service of the titular Ghostbusters, and if you know Venkman, you'll know why he physically jumps at the chance to service this woman. After a few preliminary psych tests, our protagonist finds his way into Dana's apartment and attempts to work his usual charms. But since Dana's not picking up what Venkman's putting down, all of his pickup lines are met with put-downs.
You know, you don't act like a scientist.
Dana is not like the co-eds at Columbia. She's Peter's age, and she doesn't rely on him for a grade.
I am madly in love with you.
Don't believe this.
Just as the film compared Venkman and Ray's maturity, it's now comparing Venkman and Louis romantically. Both men come on too strong for Dana, and coming from Dr. Venkman, this is downright unprofessional. Just like Dean Yeager, Dana has every right to toss this guy out of here. Venkman is persistent when he wants something, so naturally when he sees this challenge, he does what any captain of industry would do. He aims to make mounting her his Everest. Venkman will prove himself to her through solving her ghost problem, or wear her down until she consents. And on that utterly romantic note begins the rom-com subplot of the film. So Venkman doesn't get the girl right away this time. And as for the business, all the hard work and sacrifice so far has gotten our heroes nowhere. Their startup money has run dry, and there isn't even enough petty cash for Venkman to take Dana on an unwelcome date disguised as an unwelcome business meeting. The inciting incident has given this movie a whole new set of rules, and while they've certainly got the tenacity, only the very strongest ideas can survive in the free market. That is until...
We got one!
They get one. Finally, the team gets to do what they promised they'd do in the movie poster. There's a grim grinning ghost terrorizing the Sedgwick Hotel, and they've just been hired to bust him. And so begins the main plot of the film, going to work. At the hotel, they're greeted by David Hyde Pierce's understudy, who begs them to keep a low profile while working on the 12th floor. He's embarrassed he's even called them. On the way to the elevator, they meet a man with all the confidence and screen presence of a celebrity cameo without actually being one. Murray Rubin, best known for Ghostbusters.
What are you supposed to be, some kind of a cosmonaut?
A cosmonaut? Oh, sir, if you only knew. The very idea that a state-funded scientist from communist Russia could be confused with these bootstrapping young lads who use science for profit the way our American God intended. While the profession of ghostbusting clearly doesn't get any respect, it's certainly a dangerous field. Making a living through trapping the dead requires a huge risk to a professional's own safety, as well as the safety of anyone who's standing nearby. First of all, there are these unlicensed, untested nuclear devices strapped to each of their backs, which they don't seem to have a very good handle on.
I did that. That's my fault.
Then there are the ghost attacks, which luckily turn out to be mostly harmless this time. But in my experience, sci-fi goos aren't usually this innocuous. They're basically rolling the dice with this one. And of course, I'd be remiss not to point out the existential threat of crossing the streams. Intertwining the glowy noodles that come out of their ghost zappers could destroy the universe in an instant. But anyone who's seen the movie knows that this crossing the streams warning is not just for humor's sake, it's also a surprise tool that will help us later. Well, they've faked it, and now they've maked it. The nerds' theories and calculations didn't destroy the universe, and thus the Ghostbusters' boast to bust the ghost has been wholly proven to the hotel's host. However, hearing what they're charging for the removal, Diet Niles Crane tries to stiff them on the bill.
I had no idea it'd be so much. I won't pay it.
Well, that's all right. We can just put it right back in there. Thank you.
We certainly can, Dr. Venkman.
No!
Egon's proton packs made them Ghostbusters, but Venkman's business tactics got them their life-saving payday. They've proven their worth, and it's $5,000. Now, how will the market respond? What takes us into Act 2? Making money. Talk shows, magazines, news reports. As business booms, the media gets saturated with our boys in beige. The people can't get enough of them. They're already on top, and we've only just started Act 2. We're making great time today. And look, the Ghostbusters are raking in so many gigs, their success is trickling down to other working class folks. Now they're job creators. In this scene, Winston Zedmore joins the team. He's a new character, so this is an important moment for the screenwriters to introduce him to the audience. What's going to be our first impression?
Do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
The only thing we know about this guy is that his belief system is for sale, and we immediately love him for it. He's relatable. We all gotta work. He doesn't care what they do here, and he's honest about that. Winston knows what movie he's in. He knows it's not really about the ghost, it's all about the money. Oh, and you know who else wants a piece of the action? Our good friend Dana Barrett. Yeah, lately she's developed a certain fondness for Venkman, and she even agrees to go on what she must know by now is a date with him. Of course, officially it's to talk about her case, something about the Sumerian god named Gozer and his minion Zool, that weird dog in her fridge. There's a ways to go, but as far as Dana's concerned, all of Venkman's red flags are starting to look a bit rosier. So why the sudden change of heart? Peter is still as intense as ever, invading her space like Lewis did, and while she rejected both of them before, now Dana is entertaining Venkman's ploys, and the only change that happened is that Dana started seeing more of him in the media. There's been no other scenes between them since she threw him out of her apartment. The weight of the market is on Venkman's side now. The public loves his service and thus loves him. Compare him to Lewis, who is an accountant, a tax guy. Taxes aren't romantic, they're a socialist invention for nerds who like boring things and glasses. The film wants you to see the direct comparison here. Both men were unappealing to Dana until one of them owned his own famous successful business. Peter is winning at capitalism, and as a direct result, he's also winning at love. They've risked it all, and now they've hit the big time. A true American rags to riches story. So, do we just end the movie here? What else could this film have to say? Well, I'd like to tell you that all you needed was a good idea, the startup money to pull it off, round-the-clock advertisements in every news outlet, the undying enthusiasm of the masses, and the fortitude to see it through. But there's something lurking in the shadows more sinister than any of the ghosts we've seen so far. I'm of course talking about the Environmental Protection Agency. Government regulation, the bane of any red-blooded fiscal conservative. Into the firehouse comes Walter Peck, a huge D-bag from the EPA, with his regulations and his 7% British villain accent.
Exactly what are you a doctor of, Mr. Regan?
Even the name Peck evokes a kind of nagging way about him, like an hen peck. So yeah, this absolute pecker of a man has the audacity to want to look at the Ghostbusters secret storage unit to assess any possible environmental impact, like the presence of noxious or hazardous waste chemicals. But Venkman knows better than to let him do that. Wait a minute, that request is actually pretty reasonable. Would you want toxic chemicals seeping into your water supply? And what's the harm in checking? Is Walter Peck gonna go see their machine, immediately understand how it works, quit the EPA and open the ghoul grabbers as competition? Like, put yourself in Peck's shoes for a second. Forget this is a movie. If you want to investigate a startup that claimed to catch ghosts and has this big weird containment unit in their basement, and when you want to look at it, they say, can't, ghosts, wouldn't that just be a little bit suspicious to you? And he should let the freaking EPA do their job and make sure they're not poisoning anyone, right? Am I wrong? I feel like I'm losing my mind. They had it all, fortune, fame, and a monopoly on the paranormal market, but now the government has gotten in the way of their perfect dream. And as reasonable as this guy is being, the film is clearly framing government overreach as the new villain here. And we'll see just how villainous we're supposed to think it is in the next section. While the psychokinetic energy in New York increases, Lewis throws a little get-together for all of his clients. Once again, he tries to court Dana, but she's still not having any of this. Accountants aren't sexy. Musicians are at least intriguing as long as they don't have any allergies. But business owners with big Peter energy are what Dana craves. Look at Tully, counting his pennies, keeping track of every little expense, never taking those exciting financial risks like a real man. He's buying off-brand Tylenol, while our boys dine on name-brand Twinkies like kings. And speaking of being on brand, I do think it's pretty funny that Egon's Twinkie comparison is our frame of reference as to how many kilojoules of psychokinetic energy are bouncing around New York. A consumer product is chosen as our standard to help raise the plot stakes, tying in perfectly with the overall theme. Well, it's not long after Tully's party gets going that the demon Vince Clortho, also known as the Keymaster, breaks free from his stone cocoon and attacks the taxman, chasing him all the way out to Central Park. There, the Sumerian dog corners Tully at the Tavern on the Green. Wasn't there an ancient Sumerian joke about a dog walking into a tavern?
I can't see a thing, I'll open this one.
Just like the Keymaster, always opening things. Lewis becomes possessed by the demigod and wanders off to seek the gatekeeper. And who might that be? Well, Dana gets her own evil demigod to contend with, Zool, the guy from the fridge. And she becomes the gatekeeper, which is appropriate since the whole film she's been blocking men's entrance to her apartment. This all seems a bit dicey, but fear not, the Ghostbusters are on the case. Venkman meets up with possessed Dana and bravely subdues the horny demon living inside of her. And the guys down at the station get a hold of Lewis in the possession of Vince Clortho. Egon seems to think that the Keymaster and Gatekeeper getting together would be extraordinarily dangerous. So as long as they can keep those two from meeting, then there's really nothing to stress over. Yes, for these professionals, this little issue is nothing a hard night's work and a pot of strong coffee can't fix.
Do you want some coffee, Mr. Tully?
Yes, have some.
And that's when the EPA attacks. Out of the bureaucratic shadows swoops Walter Peck, who obviously has nothing better to do than to ruin all of the Ghostbusters' fun. And your fun, too. He doesn't believe in ghosts or whatever, so he orders the Ghostbusters to shut down their containment unit. Of course, this is a bad idea. I know it, you know it, the electrician knows it, the cop knows it, Egon sure as hell knows it, but it's a direct order from the EPA, so legally it has to be done. So in one swift stroke, they throw the switch. All the ghosts they've busted have busted out of the roof. I really hope this finally teaches the EPA to indiscriminately trust every popular startup company from now on. Well, I'm not gonna lie, this is bad. Vince Clortho escapes, and whatever a demon like Vinny has in mind isn't gonna be good for humanity.
This is it! This is the sign!
Yeah, it's the sign, all right. Going out of business.
That's right, Janine. Excellent job bringing it back to the theme. As we know by now, it's never about the ghosts. It's all about the money. But now it's the Ghostbusters' turn to get busted, after the thing they warned would happen actually happens. They get shipped off to their own personal containment unit as the ghosts roam free, terrorizing Manhattan, driving our taxis with their expired licenses, selling swipes on the subways, and going full Joey Chestnut on our dirty water dogs. And worst of all, with the Busters in jail, there's nothing stopping the Keymaster and Gatekeeper from finding each other, which, as mentioned, is extraordinarily dangerous. Even in jail, the Ghostbusters are hustling. There are no days off for anyone who really wants to succeed in business. Here they check out the blueprints for Dana's apartment building. It turns out her abode was built as a sort of ghost lightning rod by a group of cultists in the 1920s. For what purpose? To summon the Sumerian god Gozer the Gozerian and bring about the end of the world. And in case you're wondering, while ancient Sumer had its fair share of gods in their mythology, Gozer the Gozerian, Vinz Clortho, and Zool were made up for this film. Presumably because Dan Aykroyd had a faulty Z key on his typewriter, which would also account for Winston Zedmore, Ray Stantz, Janine Melnitz, and Carl Winslow. The Keymaster and Gatekeeper meet up and make out a little with these humans' bodies, and I guess it's implied they maybe go a lot further than that, which is kind of a grim thought, but also didn't something like that happen in Wonder Woman 1984? Maybe this is just a gross thing that magic people did that year. Well, whatever the ritual they end up doing, they do it, and it opens up a portal to the ultimate evil determined to bring about the apocalypse. And let me be clear, the only reason why things got this bad was because of the EPA. If the Ghostbusters were still doing their job, Zool and Vinz would never have met, and thus never summoned this world-ending entity. Daring to regulate the free market has just set up the final conflict of the movie. But the free market isn't dead yet, so maybe we can still find a way out of this mess. The Ghostbusters are brought to the mayor since he's starting to get a bit concerned about all the ghosts that have been haunting the island. And wanting to get back to doing their job, they explain to him everything that's at stake right now in a fire and brimstone speech. He's not entirely convinced yet, but Venkman knows how to play his audience. And right on time, at the rallying scene before we jump into Act 3, is the whole crux of the movie.
What if you're wrong?
If I'm wrong, nothing happens. We go to jail. But if I'm right, you will have saved the lives of millions of registered voters.
Here, the film is saying that we should let the free market decide what happens because it's naturally self-regulating. Success and failure should be taken on by the entrepreneurs who are the ones taking on all the risks. The mayor sees Venkman's proposal as a win-win for him and agrees to let them lead the charge against Gozer. The theme is showing us that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. If you exploit the right powerful man's greed well enough, the peons who keep the economy afloat won't all die in some horrible cataclysmic event. Ultimately, the world will be saved tonight because it's more profitable to do so than to let it end. In that way, the free market saves the day because everyone wins. Walter Peck is thrown out and the EPA is defeated. The free market will now have free reign, but with government regulation out of the way, that's still not the end of the story. There's still one more beast to dethrone, the final boss of capitalism. With our little tax-funded menace out of the way... Oh, right, sorry. With big government out of the way... Okay, with the annoying guy out of the way, the Ghostbusters reunite with their adoring fans, which seems to be just about everyone in the city, as they ready themselves to defeat Gozer.
Might have to put a little overtime in on this one!
Even in the face of total annihilation, the bottom line is king. They reach the top of the Ivory Tower for a meeting with the CEO of Destruction, someone more established than Columbia University, more overreaching than the EPA, more elitist than the hotel manager, and even less tolerant of bullshit than Dana. Gozer is every antagonist rolled into one, but even against all of that, the disruptors have come to disrupt, and that's exactly what they're going to do. Unfortunately, Gozer resists all of their usual tactics, so the Sumerian god gets that good doomsday started by asking humanity's 4 representatives to choose the form of their destructor. Venkman picks J. Edgar Hoover, but that's largely ignored since Ray's answer is much funnier. Ray, the perpetual child, tries to think of the most pure and innocent thing he knows, something he's loved from when he was a kid. But it's not his mother, or Jesus, or Santa Claus, or even like a cartoon character. Ray thinks of an advertisement for processed sugar and gelatin. A friendly face so ubiquitous it's impossible to ignore, impossible to fear. This is the final boss of capitalism. Not a giant Karl Marx, and certainly not the EPA, which was just a mini-boss. The final boss of capitalism is a more established brand's iconography. Some other cute, pale, blobby boy that's currently threatening the Ghostbusters business. Here, the film is telling us that when the world is on the brink of destruction and 2 forces are battling it out for the fate of humanity, it will be capitalism versus capitalism. Because there is no other worthy adversary. There is no alternative. And it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. I don't blame Patrick H. Willems for saying this film isn't about anything. Capitalism is baked into every crevice of this movie and our world. So much so that we take it as a given and don't even notice when a giant product mascot rampages through the largest metropolitan economy in the world. The metaphor could not be bigger or more literal than this, but it's so normalized in our collective minds it just feels like scenery. Whether or not this was an intentional choice by the creators of the film, with the thematic arc we've seen so far, it certainly feels like the main takeaway. With certain doom all but certain, the Ghostbusters, cool-headed and confident, now double down on their collective character traits. Egon calls back to an earlier scene and suggests they actually try crossing the screens. As with everything, since they founded this company, they know that to be number one, you have to be prepared to do the dirty work that no one else will do, to risk everything. And in this case, everything is everything. The Ghostbusters believe in their idea even against public opinion, government interference, or logic itself. Even though the EPA would frown upon destroying all of existence, the Ghostbusters cross the streams, and of course it works. They roast the Marshmallow Man, save Dana and Lewis, and banish Gozer and the two puppies to a far-off dimension until it becomes profitable to bring them back again. At the end of the day, the more popular service won. More people preferred the style of the 4 laser boys over the whole world-ending vibe that Gozer put out. The market has self-regulated against the forces of evil. And now that he's even more famous, Venkman's creepiness feels much less inappropriate than it did before, and thus Dana falls for him. The film's protagonists have no character arc. The Ghostbusters never change. The entire movie, they just keep doubling down on their business and risking more. So when they win at the end, they've earned it. They already figured out way at the beginning that the free market is the natural order of things, but it took the supernatural for the rest of the world to figure that out. The sci-fi horror genre often depicts stories of scientific discovery advancing too fast for humanity's cognitive or moral grasp, and tainted by our inherent hubris and greed. And there are no shortage of examples. Ongoing shows like Black Mirror and old favorites like Jurassic Park and Terminator show us how our curiosity and lust for profits can end catastrophically, especially when they keep making too many and they get bad. And of course there's the one that started it all, Frankenstein. A story of a man who uses science to tamper with the world beyond death, and everyone pays a heavy price for it. And if we go back even further, that one's based on Prometheus. Time and time again, the moral is there are some things humanity shouldn't have power over. It's a genre rife with social commentary exposing humanity's tragic flaws to the high concept potentials of the unknown. Ghostbusters, being a sci-fi comedy with horror elements, really isn't interested in exploring the hubris of humanity in this way.
Who are you gonna call? Someone else.
It's much more interested in promoting a go-get-'em attitude. While the likes of Frankenstein and Jurassic Park suggest we need to be more mindful of our morals and humanity in the pursuit of science, Ghostbusters says we need to question less and act more. Always risk it all. Profits over everything else. Thinking about the repercussions of your actions is for obstinate bureaucrats and only leads to setbacks. Here, hubris and greed are virtuous traits, and they lead to success in business. Everything that Ghostbusters do is an act of hubris. From having the audacity to face off against the supernatural on a daily basis, to the ultimate act of hubris, challenging the very science they rely on when they cross the streams and hope that they clear the very small margin of not destroying the universe. They are never punished for their Icarus-level feats of arrogance, and are rewarded over and over again, socially, romantically, and monetarily. And on the financial side of things, everything the Ghostbusters do is also an act of greed. I mean, they're actively profiting off the imprisonment of the immortal soul, playing God for a quick buck. I don't know how you could possibly sell out more. But the film doesn't want you to feel bad about that, because the world of Ghostbusters is a very cynical one. Ghostbusters assumes a world where everyone is out for themselves. The heroes, the villains, and all those in between. And that's where much of the humor of the film is derived from. The mayor saves the world to get re-elected. These rich folks ignore a screaming man while he's being attacked by a hellbeast. And the world-changing revelation that there is life after death is not even big enough for the inciting incident, because a discovery like that isn't even useful until there's money to be had in it. Ghostbusters looks at this dog-eat-dog world and just smirks sarcastically back at us, saying, "This is good, actually." Because no matter how selfish humanity can get, when left to the will of the market, the best people will always rise to the top, since they're always going to be the most advantageous to the majority of us. Ghostbusters is cynical about a lot of things, but it genuinely loves the free market.
No job is too big, no bee is too big.
We need not look further than the film's most iconic features to prove this. There's the Ghostbusters business logo that doubles as the movie poster, the Ghostbusters business jingle that doubles as the movie's theme song, and the most famous phrase in the movie, "We gon' call Ghostbusters." It's literally an ad campaign slogan, and it's effective. It's not even a real business, but you can't say this phrase without having your brain light up with the response.
Who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters.
What?
And if you don't think brand recognition is important to the story, just ask Ray how he almost summoned the end of the world. Like its predecessors, Ghostbusters has a point. It may not be the same point, but there seems to be an agenda here.
We're paying you, aren't we?
When super science meets the supernatural, only the free market can save humanity from itself. Ghostbusters is Ronald Reagan's answer to Frankenstein. But does it use its story to make a compelling argument? As stated before, the protagonists of Ghostbusters have no real character arc, and that's fine because the movie can still be about something even without one. If you compare and contrast similar characters, note what's being emphasized at key moments of the story, and look to what themes are being debated. But this film doesn't want to debate anything, because it's already made up its mind before the Columbia Pictures logo shows up. There's no need for a character arc because the Ghostbusters are always right, and they just prove it one after another with every straw man opponent they meet. The script kind of reads like wish fulfillment for the screenwriters. Got an axe to grind with academia? Make the dean an insufferable jerk. Got a bone to pick with government regulation? Make the EPA guy a stubborn bastard. Hate taxes? Make the accountant a huge dork. Think women are materialistic? Reflect that in the love interest. Ghostbusters doesn't build build a strong argument to be tested against strong detractors. It just has a bunch of easy answers and is riddled with logical fallacies. There are also a few real-world limitations that would hurt the whole bootstrap argument if they were explored in any detail. If Egon didn't have the resources and backing of an Ivy League school, he never would have been able to develop his groundbreaking technology. If Ray's parents were renters, he wouldn't have had his childhood home as an asset to start the business. Sorry, everyone born after 1980, your kids don't get to be Ghostbusters. Well, unless Grandpa has a page on Wikipedia. And much of the Ghostbusters' hard work hinges on the fact that they didn't accidentally kill anyone while figuring out how to use their unregulated devices. A lot of their success is built off the backs of others. And it's not like they weren't making sci-fi horror comedies back then with moral stakes and actual commentary. So if the movie's argument is a bad one, so much so that maybe the creators didn't even care about it, can we say Ghostbusters is really about something? And moreover, should we even care if it is or not? A lot of good art is challenging and asks us to look deep within ourselves, but Ghostbusters instead invites us to fantasize about the possibilities of a single person, perhaps you someday, conquering not just the supernatural, but also the laws put in place to hold us accountable. Even with its flaws, it's an easy movie to watch because it doesn't really ask much from us. Those cool proton packs, the chonky looking ghosts, that souped up vintage car. We've also got some strong character performances from just about everyone. Look at them dance, it's like 4 distinctly different styles of awkward dad. And yet, even the cynical humor is funny too. I really don't think people who love this movie really care much about the message behind it because it's just too much of a good time. And does this say more about people like myself who enjoy this movie despite recognizing its shortcomings? A movie that praises the very greed and hubris that's actively destroying the world right now? I suppose we can open up any movie and start picking apart all the ways it reflects the values of the time and place it was made in and the people it was made by. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the theme, right? So was Patrick H. Willems right? Is Ghostbusters a movie about nothing? Or is that just what I'm going to tell myself next time I watch it? Now, I know free market capitalism is a big boy and it can handle a little razzing, but just to show you there are no hard feelings, I've included a link to my Ko-fi account. Hey look, I'm a small business, just like the Ghostbusters. And if you didn't care for this scant dip into socioeconomics, first, a genuine thank you for watching all the way to the end, but let me know if a video about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia sounds better to you. But if you still want more ghosts and you don't mind a little social in your commentary, then by all means check out why I think The Nightmare Before Christmas might be a feminist movie. Hey, are there any Patrick H. Willems fans in the comments? Are you yourself Patrick H. Willems? Patrick, if you're watching this, say hi to Novels for me.